These are 3 disturbing true search and rescue cases from Canada and the UK. Stories I know you haven't heard before. If you enjoy, subscribe, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and trust me, the third story is going to keep you up at night. I didn't scream. I want to say that first because people always ask. I didn't scream. I didn't drop it. I didn't run. I just stood there on the rocks, holding a waterlogged trainer with both hands, feeling something inside it settle against my palm like a stone wrapped in wet cloth. The tongue on the shoe was folded back and I could see the top of the grey sock, dark with moisture, packed tight against what was left of the toes, and I understood, before I even pulled the fabric aside, that I was holding a part of a person the ocean had decided to give back. That was August 2007. It was my first foot. It was not the last. I need to give you some context. I was 26 and volunteering with a small coastal cleanup group that monitors shorelines on the Gulf Islands, a chain of rocky, mostly uninhabited islands scattered between Vancouver Island and British Columbia mainland. The water there is called the Salish Sea. It's cold year-round, grey-green, heavy with tidal current, thick with kelp beds that cling to the rock shells just below the surface. On a clear day it's beautiful in that severe, northern Pacific way. On an overcast day, and most days are overcast, it feels like the edge of the world. We'd go in pairs, walking beaches that don't have names, picking up whatever the tide had dragged in. Plastic drums, frayed rope, crab traps torn from their lines, the odd dead seal, bloated and pale, tucked into a crevice between boulders. You get used to the smell of decay out there, salt and rot and that sweet, heavy undertone that sticks to the inside of your nose for hours. Jagged Island was one of our regular sites. No permanent residents, just old growth Douglas fir pressing down to a shoreline of sandstone ledges and gravel coves. The kind of place where your voice disappears into the trees and nothing answers. I found the shoe just above the tide line, half buried in kelp and gravel. A men's size 12 Adidas, blue and white mesh, the sole intact, laces still tied. The RCMP arrived by boat that afternoon. They bagged the shoe, photographed the site, took my statement. A forensic examiner later confirmed what I already knew. The shoe contained the right human foot, male, disarticulated at the ankle, no cut marks on the bone, no sign of trauma. The official explanation was decomposition. When a body is submerged in cold water, the connective tissue at the joints break down over time. The ankle is one of the weakest points. The foot separates, and if it's inside a modern trainer, foam sole, air pocket, synthetic upper, the shoe acts as a flotation device. It protects the foot from scavengers and keeps it buoyant until it rides the current until it finds a shore. I told myself that was the end of it. A drowning victim. Sad, clinical, explainable. 6 days later, a second foot washed up on Gabriola Island, 20 nautical miles south. Right foot, male, size 12 Reebok, a different person. Within a year, 5 feet had been found. By 2012, the count was 14. By 2019, 20. Different islands, different beaches, different brands. Nike, New Balance, Reebok, Adidas. Right feet and left feet, men and women. Some were matched through DNA to known missing persons. A woman who jumped from Patulo Bridge in 2004. A fisherman who vanished in 1985. His foot had been drifting for over 20 years before a hiker found it wedged in a log jam on Gabriola Island, still inside a size 12 hiking boot. But matching a foot to a name only answers one question. It doesn't answer where the rest of them are. The RCMP confirmed no foul play in any Canadian case. The coroner repeated the same explanation each time: decomposition, buoyancy, tidal patterns, and each time I'd read the report and think, fine, that explains 1 foot, that explains 5, but 20 feet across 17 years, appearing on beaches separated by hundreds of miles of open water. That's not an anomaly, that's a pattern, and some of those feet were never matched to anyone. No name, no missing persons file, no family searching, just a shoe on a rock with something inside it that belongs to no one. I started keeping a notebook: date, location, shoe brand, foot side, identification status. I told myself it was just for reference, but I'd find myself reading it at night, running my finger down the list, counting the ones marked unidentified. There were more of those than I wanted to admit. The one that broke something in me was number 10. December 2010, Tacoma, Washington. Tidal flats south of Seattle, where the mud stretches out in long, grey shells at low water and the air smells like diesel and brine. A jogger found it half sunk in a slit, a right foot, inside a boy's size 6 Ozark Trail hiking boot. The police spokesman said the foot likely belonged to a juvenile or a small adult. That was the phrase, juvenile or small adult. And then the report moved on. No identification was made, no match in the DNA database, no family came forward. I read that sitting at my kitchen table 3 time zones away, and I had to close the laptop because my hands were shaking. Not because of what was found, because of what wasn't. A child's hiking boot means a child was wearing it. A child's foot on a tidal flat means the rest of that child is, somewhere, in that water, unrecovered, unidentified. And the boot, this small, scuffed, mud-caked boot, had drifted away from them like a balloon leaves a child's hand, slowly, silently, with nobody watching it go. I sat there for a long time. Then I opened the notebook and wrote down the entry. Number 10, right foot, size 6, juvenile or small adult, unidentified. I still volunteer on the coast. I still walk those beaches every other weekend, filling bin bags with plastic and rope and whatever else the Pacific spits out. But I check every shoe now, every trainer, every sand-filled pump, every faded Nike wedge between the rocks. I pick them up with both hands and I feel for the weight that shouldn't be there. Most of the time they're empty. The official count, as of last year, is 24 feet recovered across the Salish Sea, 14 identified, the rest belong to no one. And every spring, when the water warms and the currents shift direction, the volunteers go back out. And sometimes, on a beach that no one visits, on an island where the trees come right to the water line and the kelp piles up in black, glistening ropes along the shore, there's a shoe sitting on the rocks, laces still tied, heavier than it should be. You don't scream, you just radio it in and wait. The sea returns what it takes, piece by piece, shoe by shoe, but what the mountains leave behind is different, because the sea doesn't arrange things neatly, the sea doesn't fold. His walking boots were placed side by side on the trail, laces untied, socks folded and tucked inside the left one. 200 meters below, at the foot of a scree slope so steep you couldn't stand on it, we found the rest of him, barefoot, both soles torn open. I've been on mountain rescue in the Lake District for 11 years. I've carried broken limbs off Helvellyn in horizontal rain. I've searched for lost walkers in visibility so poor I couldn't see my own hands. But I have never, In 63 call-outs, seen a man take off his boots, fold his socks, and walk across broken rock in bare feet to the edge of the cliff, not unless something in his head told him to. I volunteer for one of the fell rescue teams in Cumbria. I'm not going to say which one. What I'm about to describe was never reported publicly, and I want to keep it that way for the family. I was 36 at the time, 4 years on the team. I worked as an electrician during the week and gave my weekends to the fells. By that point I'd been on maybe 60 call-outs, sprained ankles, hypothermia, the occasional epic navigation failure from people who trusted their phone over a compass. Twice we've recovered bodies, both were falls. Both times, you could reconstruct exactly what happened. Wet rock, bad foothold, one wrong step, gravity. It was awful, but it was logical. You could draw a line from the mistake to the outcome and it made mechanical sense. This call-out was a Saturday in late October, low clouds sitting on the tops like a wet blanket. The kind of day where the air is more water than air and everything beyond 40 metres dissolves into grey. The call came in around 3:30, solo male hiker, early 40s, reported overdue by his wife. He left that morning for a ridge walk above one of the western valleys, experienced, well equipped. He told her he'd be back by 2. It was now 3:30 and his phone was going straight to voicemail. We split into 2 groups and started from opposite ends of the route. My team took the southern approach, working along the ridge from below, staying just off the crest where the wind was funneled between the crags and the cloud hung so low it felt like walking inside a glass of milk. About 90 minutes in, one of my teammates stopped on the path ahead of me and didn't move. I came up behind him and followed his torch beam to the ground. 2 boots, side by side, sitting on the trail as neatly as a pair of shoes by a front door. Scarpa walking boots, expensive, well broken in, the leather dark with use and weather. They were faced in the direction of travel, toes pointing along the ridge. The laces had been untied, not pulled or torn, untied, and coiled in careful loops beside each boot. Inside the left one, a pair of grey hiking socks, folded once at the cuff and tucked against the insole. The right boot was empty. I knelt down and looked at them for a long time. There was no mud displacement around them, no scruff marks, no signs of a struggle or a stumble. The ground was undisturbed. Whoever had placed these had done it calmly, deliberately, the way you put your shoes by the bed before you go to sleep. We radioed the position to base and kept moving. 200 metres further along the ridge, the path narrowed to the shelf of loose shale and dropped sharply to the left. A steep ski gully falling away 60, maybe 70 metres to a boulder field below. My teammate looked over the edge first. He turned back to me and his face had gone flat. Not panicked, just empty. The expression of someone who's already processing what they're about to say. "Who's down there?" The man was face down at the base of the scree, arms at his sides, rucksack still on, waterproof jacket zipped to the chin, mat pouch clipped to the chest strap, everything intact, everything correct, except his feet, which were bare, and the soles of both feet were destroyed, deep, ragged lacerations across the balls and the heels, the skin torn in strips by the broken rock he'd walked across to reach the edge. Not slipped, not scrambled, walked. You could see the blood trail on the scree if you looked closely, faint, washed thin by the mist, but there, a line of dark smudges on pale rock, leading from the path to the drop. He had removed his boots, folded his socks, left them on the trail, and walked barefoot across 50 metres of scale and broken stone to the point where the ground disappeared. The post-mortem confirmed the fall as a cause of death. No alcohol, no drugs, no pre-existing psychiatric history, no note. His wife told us at the debrief that they'd been fine that morning. Full English breakfast, normal conversation, kissed her goodbye, told her he'd be back in time for the rugby. Then she paused and said something that I carry around like a stone in my pocket. She said he'd been mentioning a sound. On his last 3 walks, he'll come home and mention the sound he kept hearing on the ridgelines. Not wind, he knew what wind sounded like, not mechanical, a low, constant hum. He said it wasn't something he heard with his ears so much as something he felt in his teeth. A vibration, faint but persistent. She told him to see a doctor. He laughed and said it was probably a foam mast. I went back to the spot on the ridge where the boots were placed. I stood there for 5 minutes in the cloud and wind. I looked down the scree slope where the blood trail began. The path continued along the ridge for another mile before descending safely into the valley. There was no reason to leave the trail, no shortcut, no feature, nothing but broken rock and a long drop at the end. He'd stopped, knelt down, untied his laces, folded his socks with the same care you'll fold a shirt, and then he walked off the path, barefoot, across ground that was tearing his feet apart with every step. And he hadn't stopped. He hadn't turned back. He just kept going until there was nothing left to walk on. The coroner recorded a verdict of misadventure. That was 4 years ago. I think about the boots on almost every call out. Not the body, I've made a kind of peace with that. It's the neatness, the composure, the folded socks. Whatever was happening inside his head in those final minutes, he wasn't panicking, he was tidy, he was careful, he was finishing something. 7 months later, a different team got a call out on a ridge 8 miles east. Male walker, late 50s, overdue. They found him at a base of a steep section of fell. Full injuries, rucksack still on, waterproof still sipped. His boots were on the path, side by side, laces untied, socks folded inside the left one. I asked the team leader about it at the debrief and he shut it down fast. Paradoxical undressing, he said. Hypothermia confuses the brain. People strip off their clothing because they think they're overheating. It's documented, it's medical, that's the explanation. I said it was October, not January. Neither man was hypothermic. Neither man stripped his clothes. They removed only their boots. And they did it with care and precision of someone packing a suitcase. That's not a confused brain. That's a deliberate act. He looked at me for a long time. I know, he said, but hypothermia is the box it fits in, so that's the box it goes in. I still walk those ridges. I just don't stop moving when I hear the wind anymore. Because sometimes, if I'm honest, it doesn't quite sound like wind. The ocean gives back feet without bodies. The mountains leave boots without answers. But what happened on the River Severn is different. Because the damage I saw that night wasn't done by water. It wasn't done by nature. It was done by someone who knew exactly where to cut. I know what water does to a body. I pulled 11 of them from rivers in 6 years. I know the bloating, I know the colour, that grey-white, like candle wax left in the rain. I know the way skin tears when it's been submerged too long, the way clothing wraps and binds around limbs, the way a current will strip a person down to almost nothing if it has enough time. I know what natural damage looks like, and what I found in the River Severn that November night was not natural damage. The cuts were too clean, both ankles, identical, and no one wanted to talk about it. I was 29, a joiner by trade. Kitchens, staircases, the odd bit of restoration work on older properties. Evenings and weekends I volunteered with a lowland search and rescue unit based in Gloucestershire. We covered a stretch of the Severn from just north of Gloucester down to the tidal reaches near the estuary. If you don't know the River Severn, let me paint it for you. It's the longest river in Britain and one of the most deceptive. In summer it looks almost gentle, wide, slow, brown water sliding between flat green fields, but it has the second highest tidal range of any river on earth. When the bore comes in, the water rises fast and violent, swallowing the banks, ripping out fence posts, pulling trees into the current. After heavy rains, the fields floods for miles. The water turns the colour of milky tea and it carries everything: branches, plastic, dead livestock, fence wire, anything it can pull from the land. And when the water drops again, it leaves all of it behind, piled against the banks in long, dark lines of debris: branches, mud, bin bags, tangled rope, the carcasses of sheep, and sometimes something else. The call came on a Wednesday evening in November. A dog walker on the west bank near Deerhurst, a tiny village near Gloucester and Tewkesbury, flat farmland, Saxon Chapel, nothing much else, had spotted something snagged in the debris line near Otter's Chapel. The river had surged earlier in the week and dropped back, leaving its usual mess along the banks. The dog walker said the shape looked wrong, too smooth for a branch, too still for an animal. We arrived just before dark, 4 of us in dry suits, head torches on, walking single file along the bank because the mud was thigh deep in places and one wrong step will put you into the river. The debris field was visible from 50 metres out, a wall of compressed branches and rubbish pushed against the bank by the current, maybe 15 metres wide and 2 metres high. The kind of thing you see after every flood. It smells of wet wood and rotten river slit, that thick, mineral stink that coats the back of your throat. I was the first one into the water, chest deep, cold enough to lock my breathing for the first 10 seconds. I used the pole to push aside branches, working my way towards the centre of the debris. My torch beam caught fabric first, dark, torn at the shoulder seam, then skin, grey-white, puckered, with that waxy texture that water gives flesh after prolonged immersion. I called it in. Remains, male, snagged in the debris line, and started working to free him. He was face down, arms tangled above his head in the branches, middle-aged, maybe late 40s, though the water makes it hard to be precise. Dark jacket, jeans, belt still buckled, no shoes. That wasn't unusual. The river takes shoes, it takes watches, wallets, phones. The current is merciless with loose items. I worked my way down the body methodically, freeing each limb from the debris, supporting the weight so the current wouldn't take him before we had him secured. When I reached the ankles, my hands stopped moving before my brain caught up. Both feet were gone. Not torn, not abraded, not ragged, not showing the splintered, uneven bone surface you see from a fracture or from weeks of being dragged against rocks. The separation was at both ankle joints, and the bone was smooth, clean, even, on both sides, identical angle, identical point of separation, as if a line had been drawn across each ankle and followed from something sharp, something precise, something that didn't hesitate. I'm a joiner. I've cut through oak, ash, maple and pine. I know the difference between a break and a cut. I know what a saw line looks like on a hard material. And I was standing in the River Severn in the dark, holding a dead man's legs, and the edges of the bone felt like they'd been finished with a blade. I didn't move for a long time. The water pressed against my chest. The debris creaked and shifted around me. My torch was pointed down at the ankle stumps and kept catching the bone surface, pale, almost yellow in the light, smooth as sanded wood. Both sides, mirror images. Whatever had done this had done it with the same tool, the same pressure, the same angle, twice, on a dead man, or a living one. I looked up at the bank. My team leader's torch was pointing at me from the tree line. 15 meters away, I couldn't see his face, just the light bouncing off the mist that hung over the water. And around me, the river moved in the dark, slow and heavy, carrying the smell of silt and something underneath the silt that I couldn't name but that made the skin on my arms pull tight. I radioed the details, both feet absent, clean separation at the ankle joint, no visible tearing consistent with water damage or predation. My voice was steady, my hands were not. The police arrived within 40 minutes, not uniforms, CID, 2 plainclothes detectives and a forensic team in a van. They taped off the entire bank, 50 meters in each direction. They took our statements separately, in the back of different vehicles. They bagged our dry suits, our gloves, our boots. They asked me to describe the bone's surface 3 times. Then they told us it was drowning, probable suicide. The case would be reviewed by a coroner. I said I didn't think drowning victims typically had both feet removed with surgical precision. The detective looked at me for a long time, wrote something in his notebook, and said someone would be in touch. No one was ever in touch. The case was closed. Cause of death, drowning. I never saw the coroner's report. I never saw a news story. I raised it with my team leader a month later and he said it had been handled by appropriate agencies and suggested I let it go. I couldn't let it go. 3 months later, I was in a pub with a mate who volunteered with a different unit further upstream, past Worcester. I mentioned the Deerhurst recovery and he put his pint down very slowly. He said his team had pulled a body from the Severn 4 months before ours. Male, middle-aged, caught in flood debris on the east bank. No shoes, no feet. Same clean separation, same smooth bone surface, both ankles. His team reported it, CID attended. They were told it was consistent with river damage and the case was closed. 2 men, same river system, same season, both found in flood debris, both missing their feet at the ankle, both with bone surfaces too clean and too even to be explained by water, by wildlife, by anything the Severn has ever done in the hundreds of years people have pulled bodies from it. Both cases closed, never investigated. I handed in my notice at the end of that year. I didn't give a reason. My team leader shook my hand at the door and said, "You lasted longer than most." I still live near the Severn. It's hard to avoid in Gloucestershire. It runs through everything. I walk along the high bank sometimes, where the ground is firm and the water is far enough below that I can't see the debris line. I don't go down to the river's edge anymore. I don't look at what the floods leave behind, because I know what a clean cut looks like. I spent my whole career making them, and the River Severn doesn't own the soil, but someone along its banks does.